I don't know how to start this video, but they did it again. Sandrone got buffed again. Well, technically all of the stellar characters got buffed. Hello again, it is me, Flip. But I will not be the Flip you were listening to. I am a different, more enlightened one. There were more changes in version 3 that I did not know at the time, and I am so sad because I had the video ready, but I decided to sleep instead. And when I woke up, there were more changes. Sandrone's actually technically being nerfed from what she was in version 2. So I will try and correct any of the glaze stupid Flip is about to say, and I will be stepping in whenever I'm needed, which will probably be the entire second half of the video because I need to redo it. Anyways, sorry for disturbing your viewing pleasure. Back to it. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be going over the version 3 changes that happened today, go over the updated DPS calculations for Sandrone, whilst also answering most of the questions you may have about her. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you are entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Huge shout out to all my lovely channel members, I really appreciate your support, it means the world to me. There are some people in here that have been here for a year. Please spend your money more wisely. I can assure you that Flip channel membership you're getting every month is not worth it. But enough berating for now, let's talk about the buffs. In regards to Sandrone herself, she actually didn't really receive that impactful of a change. The only thing that happened to her was that her motion values got buffed by 1.3%, so in return her personal damage was increased by 1.3% for all of her teams. And there was also a buff to her C2 making it crit damage instead of a quill. So instead of her weapon being better than getting her C1 and C2, her C2 is slightly better than getting her weapon. But overall you would still pull for her weapon first as it's very close to her C2 in power while being cheaper to obtain. And of course to her base kit, this in of itself isn't that impactful, but 2 other things got buffed, which helps out a lot. For one, the stellar field now goes up to 12 stacks instead of 10, and with those extra stacks you can now get up to a 2 times multiplier for stellar conduct, as well as 2% extra cryo or electro damage bonus. And with Sandrone, you were already getting the 10 hits within her field time regardless. And I'm going to stop you right here because what we didn't know yesterday was the fact that even though the stellar field was buffed, as I said, you now need 3 hits to increase the stellar field's stack level instead of 1. So whereas before where Sandrone herself was even capable of maxing out the stellar field to level 10 or 12, because you only needed 12 electro or cryo hits to maintain this, Sandrone or stellar conducts teams in general are going to need 36 hits every 3 seconds to maintain this. So currently Sandrone doesn't really have the teammates necessary to maintain a high amount of stacks on the stellar field. So most of her teams are going to average out to have a stellar field level of 4 to 5, in which you're losing like 40% of your stellar conduct damage and like 7-ish% of your cryo and electro damage. Okay, that part doesn't really matter that much, but yes, this is where the main nerfs for stellar teams are going to come in. Besides Yai, Chi-Chi, Beidou, Diona, they just don't have enough hits as supports. And whereas before I thought these characters had a lot of longevity in Sandrone teams, due to the fact that they don't hit that much, I can see them quite easily getting replaced. Because even if a future character has weaker buffs, if they have more cryo or electro hits so they're able to get more stacks of her stellar field, and maybe even raise it to max level, that is going to be so much more impactful than what Beidou and Diona are offering. And this does also put non-cryo or electro flex slots into question, as characters like Nicole or Shilinen may have good buffs, but again, a character can come out that's technically weaker than them, but if they have more cryo or electro hits, that can make up for it, making flex slots like that also not have that much longevity. And yesterday me is going to touch more on that later. One thing that's very interesting though is that apparently stellar hits count in AoE, so if you're in 1 to 2 target situations, you can max out your stellar field very easily. So they could also make enemies have multiple things to hit, like how enemies can have multiple limbs in HSR and stuff. So maybe that's something they can go into for stellar teams in the future, I don't really know. TLDR, besides Yai who does hit quite a lot, it looks like every teammate besides Yai can probably be easily side graded by any future stellar supports, if they have more hits. Now back to old me to talk about the rest of the changes. And to put the cherry on top, Yai also received buffs. They increased the scaling of her stellar hits, while also making her C1 give an additional 10% stellar damage bonus because it just wasn't strong enough already. But sadly, in return, like the shadow buff she got, she also received the shadow nerf, where the amount of stellar hits she can get has been nerfed. Originally, it was like once per every other wave, then it was buffed to being once per every wave, and now it seems to be in a yes yes no pattern. So for an 18 to 20 second rotations, which is what Sandrone plays in, you're losing about 2 of Yai's stellar hits from the 6 you got before in version 2. But because of the stellar buffs and the buffs to her C1, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, at least to Sandrone's team DPS. And you'll see that it did in fact make it better. Oh, old me, how innocent and sweet you were. If only you knew what I did. Now, putting the calculations on hold for a tiny bit longer, I just want to talk about some things I've been asked a lot about Sandrone. To go down the list, no, you should not pull Nicole for Sandrone. I have shown calculations multiple times on this. All of the Sandrone flex slow options are pretty much relative. Nicole just happens to be the best of the bunch for right now. I am willing to bet she's the first character that gets replaced in Sandrone teams. So please, calm down, save your pulls. There's nothing Nicole does that's special enough to warrant a pull for Sandrone, and if you have excess pulls, getting her signature weapon is a much better decision. Running double cryo sustains, Shalonin, Sucrose, Beidou, you have a ton of options right now, please don't stress over Nicole. Regarding building Sandrone, I am going to make a guide for her, but for the basics, your Goblet and Sans wants to be attack percent. EM is always going to be worse than an attack Sans, but for substats they're relatively equal depending on the team. And for her weapons, both Tidal Shadow and Mailed Flower are basically equal. It really just depends on what buffs you're getting. If Nicole is on the team, then you're going to want to run Mailed Flower because it gives less attack and more EM. And if you're in teams with more EM buffs, that's when you're going to want to run Tidal Shadow, as it has more attack percent and less EM. And the last thing to talk about, should you pull Yai for Sandrone? And compared to Nicole, this is actually something worth talking about. As of right now, Yai, especially with her C1, and you should be picking Yai C1 up from the Constellation Selector if you don't have it, she is doing a lot for Sandrone. This is not to say that Sandrone doesn't function without Yai, as again you'll see in a bit, but as I said before, Yai is doing a ton of heavy lifting for Sandrone teams, with both her damage and buffing being comparable to the likes of what Inefa does for Flints, if not arguably more. So to that end, yes, Yai would be a very good pickup for your Sandrone. It's just that until the 7.0 beta, we don't really know what Hoyoverse is planning, and Yai is so good in Sandrone teams right now that I really don't see her getting replaced actually. Not for a decently long time at least. But again, Zebai was like the best DPS in the game, and then Hoyoverse decided to add Linnea to Zebai's teams. They can really do anything, it's unpredictable. So if you want to have the safest bet, getting Yai and getting Sandrone's signature are very similar damage increases, and getting a weapon is cheaper than getting a character. So if you want the safest bet available, I feel like you're better off pulling for Sandrone's weapon, as that is not something that can ever be taken away from Sandrone, whereas they can just release a better support and power creep Yai, which while I do think is extremely unlikely, this company just does whatever they want sometimes. Things will be clearer in 7.0, and regardless, even without Yai and her signature weapon, as you can see getting into the calculations, alright, calculation part I'm going to mostly take over from here. Unless it's just talking about the teams in general, which doesn't really need me. The first thing I wanted to show was that Sandrone is still pretty good even without Yai and a full 4-star team. Due to these nerfs, unironically, Yai has become more important to Sandrone teams, seeing as not only is she providing more than Beidou, but she also has more hits than Beidou in single target, so she'll be able to contribute to leveling up the stellar field better. But regarding the full 4-star team calculation and Yai list calculations, it no longer crosses 100k without Sandrone's signature weapon, sadly, but 90k DPS really isn't the worst thing in the world, on top of this being a triple sustain team with a shield, so it's going to be pretty comfortable to pilot. And while this may not look that impressive right now, compared to the top meta teams, may I remind you that Sandrone's still missing a supportive artifact set, and there'll likely be someone in 7.0, maybe a free character like the Cryo Traveler, that can take one of the sustain's place in this team. And next patch, if we get a better free or 4-star unit for this team, on top of the supportive artifact set, I can very easily see a 1-cost Sandrone team being around 120k DPS. Now, if you have a Yai under your belt as well as access to a Chi-Chi, here's a bunch of teams I calculated with this core, just to show that the flex slots don't really matter that much, in which Sandrone's new baseline is kind of just in the 130k to 140k range. I'm going to stop you right there again. Sandrone's baseline was in the 130k to 140k range, but now as you can see, that range has dropped down by around 20k DPS to being more so in the 110k to 120k DPS range, which honestly is by no means bad at all. level. This puts her just below Skirk's level of power, but she's no longer really competing with the heavy hitters like Mavuika, Skirk, Varka, Melt Durin, and of course the lunar carries. And once again, these are with some characters that aren't really that contested like Beidou and Diona, and she's still missing so much from her region that can buff her. And of course Escoffier is an upgrade over Chi-Chi, but slightly, and if you have a C6 Chi-Chi then she's the best cryo sustain. So yeah, just use Chi-Chi honestly and save Effie for another team. In regards to Yaila's teams, I already showed that Beidou as a replacement is fine, she's more than enough for right now, but as I said before, Sandrone can be used in lunar teams, even if she's not fully synergistic, and she can also be used with the Hexrai cast, even if she once again is not fully synergistic. And both of these teams function fine and are similar in power if you can't build anything better for Sandrone. So again, go ahead and scroll and pause her wherever you have a ton of options for this character. Almost anything goes with her. Now discussing Sandrone's place in the meta, I've basically said everything I've wanted to say in my last video. Most of her teammates are not contested, as they're doo-doo dookie dog shit without the stellar buffs. A lot of her best teammates are 4 stars or free in Chi-Chi's case, so basically anyone can build a team for her, and basically anyone can play her as their gameplay is so brain dead. She is the first character of a new regional mechanic, so like with Anefa, you have a year-long guarantee that this character will not fall off and will only get stronger, and she is already currently competing with some of the best DPSs in the game right now, while lacking so many guaranteed upgrades she's going to get in the future. But even mentioning the fact that she'll help you easily bypass any stellar conduct shield. And guess what? They just buffed her boss, who is already impossible for most of the cast to comfortably clear fearless regardless. So it's very likely that the shield just gets even worse. Okay, so besides saying she's competing with some of the best DPSs in the game right now, I pretty much agree with everything I said, even with the nerfs, and I honestly think the nerfs are healthier for the game, as Sandrone was really on track to break the 200k DPS barrier, but with these changes now it's very likely that she maybe remains around Zebai level even at the end of version 7 unless the stellar supports are just that cracked. So yes, Sandrone is less impressive than she was last week, and what old me is glazing, but she kind of just went for a must pull if you care about meta, to just being a very strong recommendation. So there's less pressure for you to pull for her, but at the same time she's still quite good. With that, I have nothing else much to add to this discussion, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Sandrone's more buffs, as I'd love to hear and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, thank you so much for your continued support. It means the world to me. I love you all. Never pressure me into face camming again or I will find you. Thank you to everyone else for watching the video, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.